I'm Daniel Fisher here at Sweetwater, and on today's Synth Clips, we're going to talk about looping envelopes. And looping envelopes, they're not on every synth, but man, I really appreciate them on the ones that have it, because they have the qualities of envelopes in that you can adjust the attack, decay, sustain, release, and sometimes the delay and hold parameter as well. But by looping them, you now also can use them in a way like you would use LFOs, where LFOs loop the same shape over and over. But it can be a more complex shape than your typical LFO shapes of triangle or square or saw. And if you're careful, you can probably adjust these in a way to actually get those basic shapes, but clearly you can get more complex than that. A couple of things that make envelope looping a little tricky is, one, it doesn't have an exact speed that you can immediately guess at. What it is the addition of the time of the attack and the decay and the release, and sometimes the hold parameter is calculated in there as well. I know that the Moog Subsequent 37 does not include the delay parameter, which is time before the envelope starts. They don't mess with that. But your attack, decay, sustain, release, and hold all become part of this total time of the envelope before it loops. And so in other words, it won't loop again until it's done doing its thing. And to make it even a little more confusing is you can synchronize the envelope, which basically says that every time a certain unit of the beat of your master clock ticks, it will restart the envelope. And depending on the length of your envelope and the speed of your clock, one of those may override the other, but you can actually set it up to where you have multiple times moving within the time of the other thing. Difficult to talk about, difficult to draw. The only thing you can do is listen and hear it. So I'm going to do that. So just a quick refresher on some of the envelope parameters. I currently have an init preset, so I'm using what I'm calling an organ envelope, instant attack, full on sustain, instant release. If I set my sustain halfway down and add some decay time, you're going to hear it attack instantly and then fall at a certain time to halfway down. And when I let go, it's instantaneous. Now I'll lengthen my release time just a little bit. Even more. There we go. And if I loop it, just by hitting this loop button, and I'm doing it on the amplitude envelope, it's going to do that shape over and over. And the first one I'm going to adjust is the sustain level. I'm going to lower it a little bit. Now notice that the shape of that looping envelope changed because it's now falling farther to a lower sustain level, but the time of the envelope didn't change because sustain is one of the parameters of an envelope that has nothing to do with time, it has to do with levels. So now notice as I change the release time, the looping envelope will get shorter because it's taking less time to get through that whole thing. And one of the really cool things about looping envelopes, especially on a true analog synthesizer, is that you can get those to go into audio frequencies. Now, as I talked a little bit earlier about sync, that's a different thing. That is where the envelope restarts every time it hits a certain unit of the beat, and you get to choose what it is. Let's see what it is here. Now we're hearing the envelope restart every time this light is lighting twice. And notice that now when I change the times, like the release rate, it's not changing how often the envelope is retriggering because we're not really looping anymore. And so what actually happens is the envelope restarts regardless of where it is in the ADSR setting. So not too hard to understand, but when you turn both looping and synchronization on, Now it gets a little weird because there are two separate things that are telling the envelope to restart. And depending on which one is telling it to do it sooner, that's the one that's going to take over. So it's very possible to get very complex rhythms. And right now, all I'm doing is sending that to amplitude because that is the amplitude envelope. But I can do the very same thing to my filter envelope. Whenever I do that, whenever I use my filter envelope to do something crazy to something else, I typically turn the envelope EG amount to 0. This is usually a bipolar setting, so I set it to the detent in the middle, which is no envelope is being sent to the filter. And typically if you go left of 12 o'clock, you get negative, the inverse shape of that envelope going to your filter. I'm going to do neither. I'm going to set it to 0. So you'll notice in mod 1 and mod 2, we have FEG, which is filter envelope generator, as the source. And I'm going to turn everything as a destination to 0 except pitch, because again, pitch is a really good way to hear what a complex modulation is doing, because our ears hear pitch differences better than anything else. So mod 1 on a subsequent 37 defaults to having the mod wheel do the amount of something. So I'm going to just turn the pitch amount up, but with the mod wheel down, it does nothing. And then as I turn up the mod wheel, you'll hear it. And now I'll put that envelope into loop, and you'll hear the pitch loop like that. So that's definitely a sound effect you don't automatically think of using. It is a fresh idea to add to your synthesis. And so now that we've tried it with pitch and we can hear and understand what it's doing, now we'll do it to filter instead. And again, my envelope amount to filter is not on. I'm going to do it from mod 1, allowing me to use the mod wheel to do it. So first I'll close the filter a little bit. Okay. And now I add it to filter. There we go. Ah, it's beautiful. I'm going to turn on some reverb just to see what that sounds like. And now I'll throw a little delay on there too, just because it's a pretty interesting sound. And then I'll mess with the parameters and hear how it changes in real time. All right, so now one more interesting thing that you can do, because you know that changing the attack time, the decay time, the release time changes the speed of that loop, you can now assign something to change those EG times, effectively changing the speed of the loop. So I'm going to use the amplitude one again. It's nice and easy to hear. So if I put that on loop, okay, and now I'm going to go to my mod, and I'm going to just choose a triangle wave, and I'll have it going fairly slow. And down here, I can assign it to something that I choose, and I'm going to choose EG time, and I'll turn its amount up. But again, because I'm on mod 1, it goes to this mod wheel first. So nothing should change. There it is. But as I move the mod wheel up, watch how this slowly increasing and decreasing triangle wave changes the time of those parameters, and therefore changing the time of the loop. And so that lets you make a fairly complex rhythm as a controller source. And by the way, I'm using the Collider. That's a delay and reverb pedal by Source Audio. It's not only giving me delay and reverb, but it's also letting me take this monaural device and put it into a left and right, so you have a little bit of a stereo image. So now let's move on to another keyboard. So now I have the ASM Hydrasynth, and I chose this one because they do have envelope looping, and they have 5 envelopes. And they also have 5 LFOs. And it's kind of funny, each of their LFOs can be set to 1 shot, making them more like envelopes, and each of the 5 envelopes can be looped to make them more like LFOs. Now, envelope 1 is typically assigned to filter, envelope 2 is typically assigned to amp, and then 3, 4, and 5 you can assign as you please. You can assign any way you want, but there is a knob on filter and amp that goes to envelope 1 and envelope 2 automatically. We're going to start with amp, so I'm going to do envelope 2. And it's currently set, again, at what I call the organ envelope instant on, full sustain, instant off. And I'm initialized, so you have that sawtooth. And then on page 2, I've got the envelope loop parameter, but instead of it being an on and an off, it's off and then numbers from 2 up, which means it will do the envelope loop a specific number of times and then stop. That's really interesting. So if I turn it to 2, for example, and go back here and just sort of set up a very basic envelope, it's going to do this envelope shape twice. And if I go back and make it 3, it'll do 3. And I can take that all the way up to 50, and then it goes to infinite. So it's just going to loop indefinitely. You heard it going out of time. That's because I can start each key independently, and because each envelope starts independently, whatever rhythm I do by rolling, you're going to hear that rhythm, which is really cool. If I hit them together, if I roll them, definitely something to think about. And then they have a parameter called free run. If I turn that on, the envelopes are now free running. And so now I'm going to first mess with the attack, decay, and release times and show you once again how that speeds up and slows down the envelope loop. I'm going to leave it on infinite. gotta say, for a digital synth, these envelopes go really fast. So now I'm going to do something different, and that is I have the ability to play with the curves of the attack and decay and release, whether that's linear or exponential. Let's see, we'll go on to page 3 here. I got my attack curve. I can do exponential, logarithmic, and so it's the difference between this and this and this, right? So we'll start with the attack. Now, maybe we'll start with the decay. We'll start with the decay, and I'll slowly move that. I'm going to set them all to 0, which is linear. In other words, it's just a diagonal line. And then let's see if we can hear the difference. And the cool thing is that now I'm drastically changing the shape of the envelope, but not changing the time, because I'm only changing the curve of each of the rates of attack and decay and release, but I'm not changing the actual length of time it takes to get there, just what kind of curve it uses to get there. So now I'll do the same with attack. So it's very interactive with your times as well as your curves. The Hydrasynth also has the ability to sync to clock. It's called BPM sync, but instead of just restriking the envelope every time the clock comes around, this one all of a sudden changes all my attack, decay, and release times to units of the beat. So now I can make my decay be a half note, my attack be an eighth note, and my release time be 16 times the clock, you know? As I change my tempo, I have a tap tempo here, as I change that, you're going to hear the envelope's going to change. And again, every one of these brands does it slightly differently, so there's no hard and set rule. So what I've tried to show you is like all of the general ideas of how it works, but you've really got to try it on your own. Use a real simple patch, and again, go to pitch if you're confused. If you have any further questions about the subsequent 37 or the ASM Hydrasynth, contact your Sweetwater sales engineer. If you're enjoying this Synth Clip series, we've put all the ones made so far into the playlist down below. My name is Daniel Fisher. Thank you very much for watching.